Tonight, we are seeing a major escalation out of Minnesota as the Pentagon reportedly places about 1,500 active-duty U.S. Army troops on alert for a possible deployment. This comes just days after President Donald Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a rarely used law that could allow federal troops to respond to unrest inside the United States. And while no deployment has been confirmed, officials say preparations are now underway. Good evening. I'm Jack Reynolds, and this is The Jack Reynolds Show. Tonight, we're breaking down what's been reported, why the military is now preparing for a possible move into Minnesota, and what local leaders are saying as protests and tensions continue to grow. According to multiple reports citing defense officials, roughly 1,500 active-duty soldiers have been placed on a heightened readiness status in case they're needed in Minnesota. These troops are reportedly assigned to 2 infantry battalions from the Army's 11th Airborne Division, based in Alaska, a unit known for cold weather training and operations. Defense officials describe the move as a precaution, saying it's a form of prudent planning in case violence escalates further in the Minneapolis area. At this time, it is still unclear whether the troops will actually be deployed. This development comes after continued protests in Minnesota tied to a major federal immigration enforcement surge, an operation that has led to intense clashes in recent days. The protests grew after 2 recent shootings connected to federal immigration officers. One of those incidents resulted in the death of Renee Good, a U.S. citizen, which has sparked outrage in demonstrations that have spread far beyond Minneapolis. As federal enforcement expanded, tensions on the streets increased, and now the conflict is moving into a wider national debate. President Trump has previously suggested that he may use the Insurrection Act, a law dating back to the early 1800s. That law can allow a president to deploy active-duty military forces domestically or take control of National Guard units under certain extreme circumstances, such as rebellion or major breakdowns in public order. President Trump has described the unrest as attacks on federal officers and labeled some protesters as insurrectionists. However, after making strong statements earlier in the week, the president later indicated that he did not believe the situation required the Insurrection Act right now, while still leaving the option open. Pentagon and administration officials have emphasized that preparing troops does not automatically mean they will be sent. Statements from defense officials suggest the Department of Defense is simply staying ready in case the president makes a decision to act. In other words, planning is happening, but an actual deployment is not confirmed. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has warned that the federal government may be trying to create conditions that would justify an active-duty deployment. He urged protesters to remain peaceful and said the city should not give anyone an excuse to escalate further. Frey described the possibility of active-duty troops entering the state as a serious and alarming scenario, and emphasized that local leaders are trying to keep the public safe while tensions remain high. At the same time, Minnesota leaders are facing growing legal and political pressure. There are ongoing legal challenges surrounding the federal immigration operation in the state, with lawsuits arguing the enforcement surge is unconstitutional and politically motivated. Meanwhile, reports also indicate the Justice Department has launched actions that could involve investigations into Minnesota's top leadership, including the governor and the Minneapolis mayor. State leaders have strongly rejected those accusations, calling the federal actions extreme and unnecessary. So here's why this matters tonight. The possibility of active-duty troops being deployed against unrest inside the United States is extremely rare, and historically, it's considered a last resort option. Even preparing troops signals that the federal government is treating the Minnesota situation as serious and potentially escalating. And as protests continue, the next decisions from Washington, from the Pentagon, and from state leadership could shape what happens next. Right now, about 1,500 active duty soldiers are on alert, and Minnesota remains at the center of a fast-moving national confrontation over immigration enforcement, protests, and federal power. We'll continue watching every update closely. I'm Jack Reynolds, and this is The Jack Reynolds Show. If you want the latest breaking updates, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and good night.